Hi everybody, I'm Rob, and I am returning to finish off the Cornetto Trilogy with The World's End. Whereas Sean was a horror comedy, Hot Fuzz was an action comedy, World's End is more of a science fiction comedy. And a lot like with the other two, the genres are a little more downplayed and focusing more on the comedy. Now, Hot Fuzz focused a lot more on the detective police work style of it, and this one focuses a lot more on the comedy, sort of like Sean did. And I think that really pays off for the tone and style they were going for. Now, don't get me wrong here, there are a lot of really good human moments. The characters are all good, everything gels together really great. So I can't really say it doesn't fit in with the other two. As a matter of fact, I do think that this one is a lot more of a spiritual successor to Sean. In the whole, it focuses so much on the human element over everything else that's going on. So the movie follows Gary King, played by Simon Pegg, who is returning to help write with Edgar Wright, who returned to direct this one to fully finish out the trilogy. And Gary is a guy turning 40, lamenting how back in 1990, it was June or July, sometime in the summer, him and his four buddies tried to do their golden mile, hitting 12 bars in a little town in England, something Haven. Yeah, I'm one of those people. I don't really remember names too well, but small town, easy enough to figure out. And he goes through it. Oh, made it this far. This guy decided to drive out, so he went home. This happened here. This happened here, and we never finished it. All right, you're not thinking everything of it. And then you find out, he's a 30 something, late 30 something, heading towards 40, sitting in a circle. And it definitely looks like an AA circle. So, like, oh, okay, here it is. And he laments that this was the best moment of his life. When he looks back, this is it. This is the golden sticker moment. So now he's suiting up and he's going to get the band back together to go and finish this 12 pub crawl. Now, the issue with that is he's had a falling out with pretty much everybody. Because being a jerk when you're 17, you can still do it if everybody's having a lot of fun and all that. But once you hit, 20, 25, 30, you can't be that jerk anymore because people are just fed up with it. Nobody has time anymore. So we'll start with, who do you see first? Peter, played by Eddie. Check the notes. Yeah, sorry. Eddie Marsan. There are two of the main five actors. I don't know. He's one of them, sadly. I did a quick Wikipedia search, and he's actually the same actor who played the headmaster in Deadpool 2. Same dude. If I hadn't wikied it, I'd have never known. But Pete, super cool dude, chill. He's working at a car dealership run by his dad, and sort of the cliche that if anybody's a full-grown adult and they're working in their parents' shop, they either fall into one of two categories. One is the absolute stuck-up jerk who doesn't believe he can do anything wrong, and then there's where Peter falls, which is very docile, very soft-spoken, all that. And he doesn't want to go with Gary. But okay, fine. So Gary goes to the next guy, played by Patty Considine. I apologize so hard for that. Again, he's another actor I haven't really seen anything of. I do believe he played one of the inspectors in Hot Fuzz. I'm sure I've seen him in a few things. I think he's even in the new Amazon Lord of the Rings, or maybe House of the Dragon. Something with swords. He's in one of those. Again, I'm really sorry. Again, these are really good actors. They're spot on, perfect casting for this. I haven't really seen a lot of the things they're in, so I do apologize. But he's the heading into 40. He's doing good for himself. Everything's great. Dating a 26-year-old fitness instructor. Everything's good. And he doesn't want to go, but he says okay. So then Gary goes to the next guy, Oliver, played by Martin Freeman, who I do actually know thanks to the Hobbit movies, where he played young Bilbo, as well as in the MCU and Sherlock. Or was that Holmes? It was something. It was the British one. Like, there's always something Sherlock Holmes going on in the world. You know I'm right. And he's a realtor. Again, doesn't want to go with Gary, but he says fine. So now Gary has to go and see the last member, Andrew, played by Nick Frost, who is the exact polar opposite of where he started in this trilogy, the same way Simon Pegg has switched. The first one, Nick Frost played a very lazy, layabout, easygoing dude. And in this one, he is office, tie, suit, in at 7, out at 5, married, kids, 2.5 garage, all that. Whereas Gary is dressed all in black, exact wardrobe he wore 20 odd years ago, hasn't grown up. Very tension heavy scene. Well, we do learn that there was some sort of an accident that the two of them were involved in. We don't know anything about it yet. And we don't learn anything about it for quite a while through the movie. But Andrew doesn't want to go. He's still mad. But Gary tells him, well, my mom just passed a few weeks ago. It's been really hard. So Andrew relents and they all go and return to the small town. And instantly Gary is, let's go. That is, get hammered. And this is the part where you're like, he is really anxious. And every time they're on their way to the bar, he's always like 2 steps ahead of them, 3 steps ahead of them. He is ready to get there, get going, and finish this. Very goal-oriented, which I don't hate goal-oriented people, but he's just very jerkish about it. So they all come along. Everybody gets a beer except for Andrew, who's quit drinking after the accident. So, gotta love him for that. You know, drink responsibly, kids. And Gary's not having it, he's mad. So, as they're moving on and on and on, eventually they run into Sam, who is Oliver's younger sister, who 20 odd years ago had ended up hooking up with Gary. And then he, being a jerk, they just, no, that's not happening. Well, over the course of this whole thing, too, we find out that Steven also had a crush on her, and he just never said anything. He just kind of kept it quiet. The one time he did say anything, Gary was like, no, she's with me now. So that's when he was all interested in her. Which, you know, I'm not so old that I don't remember those days when a lot of us had friends like that who were kind of jerkish. I wasn't, but yeah, no. With this face, no. So they're going on, and Sam bounces. She's already done with Gary and all of his bullshit. So they're going and they're going and they're going. Next bar, they find out Gary's mom isn't dead, so they're mad. While Gary goes to the bathroom and he's mad and all this, and he finds just a little crack in the bathroom where 20 years ago he put his fist into it and cracked it. That's the only thing in the town that actually remembers him, short of being banned from one bar. I'll name all the bars later. Don't worry, they're all important because Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright have to make sure that they go full Chekhov's gun. For anybody who doesn't know, Chekhov's gun is a literary term. I believe he was Russian or some sort of an author named Chekhov. Believe that if you mention a gun in the first chapter of your book, it should go off in chapter 2. And that's really something that I do love about this trilogy, is that it's always set up, payoff. Sometimes it'll pay off 2 or 3 times, sometimes it'll set up 2 or 3 times for the payoff. And they're all really, really, really good at that. So, while he's in this bathroom, he's trying to invite this young kid along. Like, my buddies are gonna abandon me. Hey, you wanna go hang out, do some bar hopping? And the kid's not having. He's not even looking at him, not even acknowledging him. And then they end up getting into a fight. Well, Gary gets mad, rushes him, and ends up knocking his head off, revealing that he's a robot. Well, by the time his 4 friends come in, Gary's holding this robot body covered in blue goo. And all of them are, naturally robot. Except for Andrew, who is beyond mad and still riding the "your mom's not dead, you lied," which is when the robots' friends come in, who are also robots, and start a fight. And something I gotta add into this, because I really praised Hot Fuzz for it. The choreography for the fights in this are spectacular. They are brilliantly good. There are a couple over the course of the movie, and this one sets the tone for it. It's well choreographed. I cannot imagine the amount of planning and stress that went into any of these fights, especially this one. The camera constantly zooming past people, through people. People are passing past the screen. It is insanely brilliant. Well, they stop the robots and talk it out, and somehow come to the conclusion that, okay, we don't know how many of them there are, but we have been telling everybody, we meaning Gary, because everybody's got to know that the Gary King has returned. Ugh. We all know people like that. If you don't know a person like that, you're that person. There's your warning. So somehow he convinces them that we need to keep going on our little mile trip. Well, the next bar, or the next one after that, they run into Sam again. And Gary tries to warn her. She doesn't listen and ends up getting attacked by blanks, is what they end up being called. Because robot is an offensive term to them. Because robot means slave, which arguably isn't wrong. So now she's on the team and she wants out. And now Oliver's ready to roll. He's ready to keep on the bar hopping. And pretty soon it's getting a lot worse. All of a sudden, when they walk down the street, people are just standing and watching them go. And then they get to one bar run into their old, I guess, high school principal, played by Pierce Brosnan. Yeah, how many other trilogies can you name where they end up with 2 James Bonds? So he has them sit down and they're talking, and he just points out, yeah, I'm a blank. You know, we're not here to do anything bad. We're here to help you. We don't want any trouble, all that. And Oliver's going with it. You know, this makes a lot of sense until Andrew notices a birthmark on his face. Now, when they all met up, Oliver had revealed that a little birthmark he had laser removed, because it just get rid of it, ain't no big deal. But now it's back. And so Andrew just grabs a stool and smashes his head in, revealing he's been replaced. And this leads to another spectacular brawl. Everybody's fighting except for Peter, who's, again, right back to the timid style. He's hiding. He'll duck under a table. He'll try to get away. He'll hide. And, again, spectacular choreography here. And then they manage to clear out the bar, and then more of them show up. So it's time to go. So Gary and Sam head up to the roof and try to get away. Gary manages to get her to her car and tells her, just go. I'll keep going. You just get out of town. And I got to give it to Rosamund Pike, who plays Sam, for really kind of hitting this perfect note. Like, this is kind of that moment where she doesn't like Gary. Gary kind of likes her. And they just have this real solid moment of just getting along just perfectly. And she does carry just that perfect tunage. Like, you're not my best friend. I wouldn't even invite you to my wedding, but I don't want to see you get hurt. Like, there's just enough good in you to make you decent. And he acknowledges that, and she goes. Well, he goes to running through town, trying to hide, and ends up in a little shack where 20 years before, after they'd left the previous bar, they went there, smoked a J, and then ended up having to end the night because they started freaking out. So they get there, and then it's, are you a blank? Are you a blank? So they start running through it. No, Gary had Steven fall on a beer bottle, so he's got a scar on his butt. Peter, he ran over with a motorbike, so he's got a scar on his leg. Ended up hurting Andrew's finger, which then Andrew points out, how about the femoral artery scar from the accident? Because Gary was ODing. And so Andrew loaded him up into the car and took off, and then ended up wrecking. Well, Gary took off and left Andrew behind, bleeding out in the car. And okay, that's how the accident. Now it all makes a lot of sense. And then it's Gary's turn. He had an elbow scar from a surgery. He's got a steel plate in there. Well, Gary does it like, no, I'm not doing that. So he bashes his head into a post. Like, would a blank do that? Well, no, for two different reasons. One, their heads come off surprisingly easy, honestly. Like, the design flaw, like, eh. And also, why would they? That's really stupid. So, alright, it's time to get going. So they start heading to the next bar. Well, on the way there, Peter runs into the blank version of his high school bully, who they'd met at an earlier bar, and Peter had mentioned, yeah, this guy made my life a living hell, which, as somebody who's been bullied, yeah, it's not really something you forget or forgive. And Peter got it a lot worse than I know I did, and I still remember. I work with the guy, not a fan. He's a good worker, though, I'll give him that. Anyway, so Peter decides no, and just goes ham. Full, yeah, he's done. Starts hitting him with a tree branch, whole nine. Well, unfortunately, by the time the other guys notice, Peter is already being surrounded by other blanks and taken away. So he's out. Well, they get to the next bar, and yeah, it's time to go. We're done with this. Well, Gary doesn't like it and ends up getting punched out and carried to the next bar, which they have to go to get through to get to Gary's car, which is the same car he had 20 odd years ago back then. Are you seeing a pattern here yet? So, alright, well, unfortunately, Gary wakes up, he has his drink, oh, we made it so far, and then he takes off for the next bar. Well, Andrew follows him, Steven steals the car, and they get into the next bar. Andrew has to fight, Steven comes through the wall with the car, gets surrounded, Gary takes off, Andrew goes after him. Steven's getting pulled out of the building inside the car by a gigantic, weird, modern art statue robot deal. I can't even tell you how to really describe it. Yeah, it very angular. How about that? That's all I got to say. Not blocky, very thin, sharp, I guess. But they get to the world's end, and this is where Gary and Andrew have their big clash because Andrew's done. He's done with this, and he reveals, I don't have my life together. I know you think I do, but I don't. My wife left. She took the kids a couple of weeks ago. She said I wasn't there. And then we find out that meeting Gary was in that we saw at the beginning wasn't just an AA meeting. It was in a psychiatric hospital. The reason he didn't want to show his scars is because he'd have to take his long coat off, which would reveal the recent bandages on his wrists. And then it all kind of comes crashing down that he's been so stuck in the past that this was it. His life never got better than that, like he thought it would. And it's just this crushing weight that over the years has drug him down more and more and more and more until he hit rock bottom. And this is he's all right, I'm done. Like, I'm gonna go redo this moment and that'll be it. And then we find out that this is like the central hub for all of the blanks, the network as it's called. And they're lowered into a pit because he pulls a little bar tab and elevators down, all that. And then here come all the blanks, like, hey, things aren't that bad. We're not here to hurt anybody. We just want to make things better. And then drunk people getting into an argument with somebody not drunk is the best way to describe the scene. If you know that type of moment, then you understand this scene. Because the network's trying to explain, like, yeah, we're in multiple cities all across the world. Just replacing a few odd eggs and putting our own in. We're, advancing technology in the last 20 odd years. Haven't you noticed? Isn't that great? And Gary and Andrew are like, no, like, yeah, that's really nice and all, but how many people have you had to kill to get there? Do the ends justify the means type? Did we ask you for this? What do you very clash. And then Steven shows up, like, yay, he survived. And then the network tries to lure Gary, like, hey, here's 5 copies of you and your friends from 20 years ago when life was good. We're just going to download your mind into him and you can live forever, all that. Well, Gary's like, no, you can go to hell. Rips his clone's head off and, no, go away. Like, we're people, we're human. To be human is to be flawed. And, no, bounce. So finally, the network is just like, alright, I'm done, fuck it. And bounces. Everything's shutting down. All the blanks are down. And huge, a weird electrical orange ball of death. That's the best way to describe it, really. Thankfully, Sam shows up, saves them. They get out of town just as it explodes, and just leaves the entire town just a smoldering crater. Well, when the network left, they ended up releasing a global electromagnetic pulse that shut down all technology. So we're pretty much right back down to the steam engine. And the end of the movie is Andrew kind of narrating to a bunch of people sitting around a fire how things went. Now, we don't know what the ultimate casualty count was because we can't talk to anybody anymore. But, you know, all the blanks woke back up about a week later. Kind of lost, but they did get just enough of themselves going. The blank of Oliver went back to work, showing off houses. The duplicate of Peter went back to his family. Whether they noticed or cared, who knows, but he's still a good dad. Sam and Steven hooked up, living in a little shack outside of London. Andrew and his wife got back together, going full vegan. He doesn't miss anything, except for Cornetto, evidently, because we get a nice little Cornetto wrapper that floats by with longing reach. At this point it was already known as the Cornetto Trilogy, so it's really nice that they gave it that nice little flair. So, whereas Gary just vanished. Don't know what happened to him. Well, we find out what happened was he went back, got the blanks of his friends, and set off on the road. The movie ends with him and the blanks walking into a bar and ordering 5 waters, which calls all the way back to when they started it, the mile. Andrew wasn't drinking, he was just getting water, and pointed out the most manly thing you can do isn't chug a beer, it's walk into a crowded bar full of a bunch of ruffians and order with a straight face a glass of water. And now that's what Gary's doing. Symbolizing both, this is his most adult version, but also that he's quit drinking. Which, character development's always great. And that's just kind of where everything gets left off. So, does it work? Absolutely, 120%. Everything is set up and paid off. Like the bars. I got a little list here. Alright. So, in order of the bars they go to, the First Post, the Old Familiar, the Famous Cock, the Cross Hands, the Good Companion, the Trusty Servant, the Two-Headed Dog, the Mermaid, the Beehive, the King's Head, the Hole in the Wall, and the World's End. Now, each one of these actually pertains to something that happens. First Post, first bar they go to. The Old Familiar is literally the same set as the first bar and looks spectacularly the same. Even the extras look exactly like the other ones. I don't think any of them are twins or reused, but pretty spot on. The Famous Cock, they're not even allowed in because Gary got banned 20 years ago. And the Cross Hands is when they fight the blanks in the bathroom. The Good Companions is just one they all go to. All 5 of them get a drink, which Andrew hadn't been doing in all the previous bars. He's been very, no, I'm good. But after the fight, he does a couple of shots. Like, okay, let's do this. Let's see here. In the Trusty Servant is when Gary runs into his old drug dealer and finds out that the blanks have taken over and you gotta walk the line or something bad's gonna happen to you. And the Two-Headed Dog is when Gary runs back into Sam, warns her, and ends up fighting 2 blanks that are twins and were Sam's friends, but now they're all, yeah. The Mermaid is... it's the best way to describe it. It's very school-oriented. Like, a lot of people are wearing school uniforms, and that's where most of the guys run into very suspiciously young looking versions of women that they were very intrigued by 20 odd years ago, who are all blanks. Spoiler alert. The Beehive is when they run into their old principal and get attacked by the swarms of blanks, so that works out pretty good. Let's see, the King's Head is the place where Gary smashes his head into the post, and they're all like, yeah, see that scar? Not a blank, all that. Let's see. Hole in the Wall is when Steven is the same one where Steven drives the car through the wall. And then The World's End, where the apocalypse starts. So that's really fun. That's a really fun little Easter egg. Honestly, it's kind of weird. This is the movie. Usually, the third movie in a trilogy isn't the best, isn't the good one out of the sort. Usually, the first one is the one that's pretty top tier. But I feel like with each movie, Edgar Wright has gotten a lot more comfortable with what he's doing, and this is the kind of the weird, perfect payoff. Throughout the entire movie, we're really following Gary's last hurrah. After you get to the end of it, and you're like, oh, okay, that's... And then the second time through, again, like with the other two, you notice all these little things. But whereas the other two were a lot of homages and Easter eggs to Romero zombie movies or action movies, this one is a lot more focused on characters and setup and payoff. Like, the original scene where Gary is telling everybody in the circle about the good day, the good, perfect night of bar hopping. This last time I went and watched it, I noticed that every single person that we see sitting there has a little hospital bracelet on. So it's one of those little Easter eggs that they don't draw attention to. You can only see, I think, like 2 or 3 of them, and you can't even see one on Gary. But now that you have gone through it and you look, you see it. And the first time through, you're like, oh, it's an AA meeting, all right. And it still works with what you're seeing. But now that you've gone through it, now you're seeing it, you're like, oh, okay, now it all makes sense. Can't really think of anything that stands out as being bad. The action is spectacularly good. Characters are well written. The comedy, nothing was gutbuster level, I'll admit that. But there hasn't really been a lot of gutbuster levels in this entire trilogy, which I don't think has really been the point. A gut-busting laugh only works once, but a good smile and a chuckle will get you down the road. And that's really what this trilogy and really this movie has managed to do. It's got a lot of interesting ideas, a lot of interesting characters, and I think it pays off pretty well. Now, kind of hits that cliche. Now, a normal cliche would have been they get to it, they beat the aliens, aliens leave, everything's good. The semi-cliched version would be they fight the aliens leave, and everything's still in chaos. But where I think it kind of subverts it is, in any normal science fiction movie, Gary would have stayed. He would have grown up, like, okay, I don't need to follow what I did 20 years ago. I can be better today. I'm looking forward to tomorrow. I'm not living in the past anymore. But it plays it in more into he has grown up. He's moved past that moment. But he's making his own life with the old friends he had. I kind of like it in an odd way. Like, it grinds on me just enough to notice it, but I love it just enough to go with it. I can't really say it's bad. I can't say it's good. Everybody gets a happy ending, except for everybody who died and got turned into mulch. That really sucks for them. Most memorable scene, I want to pick a fight scene so bad, or even the final scene with Gary and the blanks. Like, yeah, we just want water. We're not gonna cause any trouble. We just give us the water and everything's gonna be good. Like, it feels very old Western style, which I love. But I definitely think that the first fight in the bathroom stands out. It's well choreographed. It's character set up because Gary is he's a prick. And if he hadn't been a dick, they would probably either have gotten out of town the next morning, no problem, or they'd all been turned by midnight. It could have gone either way, but Gary started it because he's a dick. The choreography of the fight, I can't praise enough. It really kind of blew my mind. I thought the choreography for Hot Fuzz was spectacularly done and great. This one really outdid itself. So where does it fall? I I kind of got to give it a 4 out of 5. Is it as good as the other two? Yeah. Is it my favorite? No. Is it up there? Absolutely. It would be, on a good day, I would have a lot of trouble trying to figure out if it's my favorite or not. But I'll get to that some other time. Probably tomorrow. But, so the Cornetto Trilogy is done. Don't know what I'll do next. Probably something where I don't have to constantly look up lingo because culture clash. But, I've been Rob. Thanks for watching.
Later.
Alright, so as I've been doing, giving shout outs to YouTubers who've really kind of inspired me and put me on this list. And one of the names that's really popped up would be Decker Shadow. I've been a big fan of his for the last couple of years. I think it all started right around summer 2018 when he was doing the Summer of Halloween. Which, if I can, I'll tag it up above. Somewhere in there. I've really come to enjoy his work. I love his summer specials. I think he's really got a good handle on how he does things. I hope I'll eventually get to a point where I can do the same and feel pretty confident in how I do things. But honestly, I definitely think anybody who can tolerate watching me review stuff should definitely give him a look because he's definitely honed his craft and I think he's definitely a natural at stuff. I'll tag something else for me. Plug myself, why not? I hope everybody enjoys their day. Like, share, subscribe, comment, why not? Alright, take her easy.